there's a quiet rebellion spreading across the modern world. You won't see it on the news, you won't hear it talked about in self-help podcasts, but it's happening, silently, powerfully, in the hearts of millions of men. Men who have stopped chasing, stopped begging, stopped sacrificing their peace on the altar of dating. For the first time in decades, men are walking away, not out of bitterness, not because they hate women, but because they finally see through the illusion. They see the game for what it is, a cycle of validation, performance, and disappointment, designed to keep them investing more and receiving less. See, modern dating used to be about connection. Now it's about consumption. It's about who can get attention, who can get validation, who can get status. And for men who lead with authenticity, men who just want something real, that world feels foreign. It feels fake. So they opt out. They stop swiping. They stop chasing texts that never come. They stop performing for people who don't appreciate effort. And in that silence, something powerful happens. They rediscover themselves. The truth is, when a man removes himself from the endless chase for approval, he doesn't lose women. He gains freedom. He gains focus. He gains clarity. Because deep down, every man reaches a breaking point. The moment when the stress, confusion, and exhaustion of modern dating outweigh the thrill. When he realizes that peace is more valuable than passion and solitude is better than chaos. He starts to notice things. He notices that the men who chase the hardest lose the fastest. He notices that the ones who stay detached, who build quietly, who live with purpose, attract effortlessly. Not because they're trying, but because they've stopped trying. You see, there's a dangerous misconception in our society that a man's worth is measured by how much attention he can get from women. But the truth is, a man's worth is measured by how little he needs that attention to feel whole. And that's what this quiet rebellion is all about. It's about men reclaiming their peace, their energy, and their time. It's about men who've realized that happiness isn't found in endless dating apps or validation loops. It's found in purpose, discipline, and control. They're not giving up on love. They're simply refusing to chase it in a system designed to drain them. So, if you've ever felt like dating has become more exhausting than exciting, if you've ever wondered why genuine connection feels rarer than ever, you are not crazy. You are just waking up. Because the truth is simple. Men aren't dating less because they're weak. They're dating less because they're finally free. Walk into any cafe, open any app, or scroll any feed, and you'll see it. A digital carnival of faces, filters, and fantasies. Modern dating isn't about love anymore. It's about leverage. We live in an era where attention is the new currency, and dating, for most people, has become an economy built entirely on validation. Every swipe, every like, every match. It's not connection. It's a transaction. See, the modern dating world sells an illusion that options equal happiness. That if you just keep swiping, keep texting, keep chasing, you'll eventually stumble upon the one. But the truth is darker. The more options people have, the less capable they become of choosing anyone at all. Men compete harder. Women scroll longer. And both sides feel emptier. Because the game isn't about finding love. It's about feeling desired. The endless loop of notifications and compliments creates a dopamine rush stronger than most drugs. And once you've felt it, you start chasing it. Not love, not connection, but that feeling of being wanted. Here's the irony. Dating apps were supposed to bring people together. Instead, they turned relationships into digital performances. Everyone's selling an image. Men post achievements, abs, and ambition. Women post beauty, lifestyle, and desirability. And everyone's secretly asking the same question. Am I enough? But in this illusion, no one wins. Men are told to try harder, to impress, to prove their worth. But the harder you try, the less authentic you become. You stop being you and start being a salesman for your own life. Women, on the other hand, are drowning in attention that means nothing. They've become addicted to the flood of validation, but numb to genuine connection. So men chase, women filter, and everyone loses faith in intimacy. You can't build love on performance. You can't sustain attraction on validation. You can't find peace when every conversation feels like an audition. And yet, that's the world we live in, where real connection is rare and quiet confidence is seen as mystery, where emotional availability is mocked and indifference is celebrated. The truth? Most modern relationships aren't collapsing because men and women don't care. They're collapsing because everyone's too busy trying to look valuable instead of be valuable. That's why so many men are walking away. Because once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. You realize that chasing validation from someone who's addicted to attention is like pouring water into a leaking cup. So men are stepping back. Not out of fear, but out of freedom. They're learning that peace feels better than performance, that solitude feels better than desperation, and that no amount of swipes, matches, or texts can replace the power of being content on your own. This is the modern dating mirage, and the only way to win is not to play. For most men, the chase starts as a thrill, the excitement of pursuit, the dopamine rush of possibility, the fantasy that maybe this time she'll be different. But somewhere along the way, that thrill turns into exhaustion. Modern dating doesn't just drain your wallet, it drains your spirit. Because today, men aren't just chasing women. They're chasing validation. They're chasing responses, attention, and approval from people who are already drowning in it. Every unanswered text, every ghosted conversation, every breadcrumb of attention, it chips away at a man's sense of self-worth. He starts to internalize rejection. He starts to think maybe he's not enough, not tall enough, rich enough, charming enough. But that's the trap. Because the system is designed to keep him chasing. Every app, every like, every match, every maybe, it's a dopamine loop. Just enough reward to keep him addicted, just enough hope to make him stay, but never enough to make him fulfilled. You see, the modern dating scene operates on emotional debt. Men invest effort, time, and attention, and most of the time, they get nothing back. Women, on the other hand, collect validation even when they have no intention of reciprocating. The result? One side gets drained, the other gets inflated, and the man who gives too much starts to crumble. He begins overanalyzing texts, trying to say the right thing, walking on eggshells to avoid losing interest. He becomes a performer, and the more he performs, the more he loses authenticity. He's no longer himself. He's an actor in someone else's script. This is where men start to burn out. The constant emotional labor of chasing attention that isn't being reciprocated eats away at their confidence. They stop trusting women. They stop trusting themselves. And eventually, they stop trusting the idea of love altogether. But here's the irony. When men finally give up on the chase, they find peace. Because peace comes when you stop begging for what should be given freely: respect, affection, connection. When a man realizes that chasing approval is a trap, he takes back his power. He learns that attention given too easily is worth nothing. The emotional cost of the chase isn't just exhaustion, it's disconnection from your purpose. You stop focusing on building. You stop leading. You stop growing. All because you're stuck in a loop of trying to be seen by people who were never looking. And the moment you step out of that loop, when you stop chasing, everything changes. You regain your energy, your confidence, and your focus. you start to see that the real prize was never her attention. It was your peace. Because the truth is, the chase was never about finding love. It was about remembering who you are without needing to be chosen. Something powerful is happening in silence. Across cities, countries, and online spaces, men are unplugging from the chaos of dating and plugging back into themselves. They're not lonely. They're liberated. Because after years of pouring energy into people who didn't reciprocate it, men are finally realizing that attention is a currency, and they've been giving it away for free. Now they're choosing a different path. Instead of chasing validation, they're chasing purpose. Instead of begging for attention, they're building empires, businesses, bodies, and peace of mind. They've discovered that when you stop trying to be chosen, you start becoming the chooser. See, when a man redirects his focus inward, his entire world shifts. He stops waking up to check who texted him and starts waking up to check his progress. He replaces meaningless conversations with meaningful routines. The gym replaces heartbreak. The grind replaces confusion. Discipline replaces desperation. And here's the secret. When a man masters himself, he becomes magnetic. Not because he's trying to impress anyone, but because that calm, centered energy is so rare in a world full of noise. Women sense it instantly. They can feel when a man doesn't need their approval, when his worth doesn't depend on attention. That's the kind of man they respect. That's the kind of man they chase. This is the rise of the self-focused man. Not selfish, not bitter, but balanced. He's the man who knows that love is supposed to add to your life, not become your whole life. He understands that relationships are a choice, not an obligation. He invests his time into learning, earning, and improving, because he knows something most men don't. The world doesn't reward the distracted. It rewards the disciplined. For decades, society told men to prove their worth through what they could give to women. Their time, money, loyalty, and effort. But the new generation of men is rewriting that script. They're learning that before you can lead anyone, you have to lead yourself. Before you can love someone else fully, you have to respect yourself completely. And that shift, that turning point, is what separates weak men from strong ones. Because weak men chase validation. Strong men create it from within. So when a man chooses solitude over chaos, progress over parties, and purpose over attention, he's not isolating himself. He's investing in his future. He's building the foundation of a life that doesn't collapse when someone leaves. That's the beauty of self-focus. When you stop chasing temporary highs, you start building permanent peace. And ironically, that's when everything you were chasing begins to find you. Because the world bends to the man who no longer needs it. And every time a man chooses himself over distraction, he steps closer to that unshakable truth. That peace will always outlast pleasure. Every man, at some point in his life, chases approval from parents, teachers, bosses, and eventually women. It's programmed into him. Society teaches men that their value depends on how much they can provide for others, how many people like them, how much they can please. But here's the truth that most never realize until it's too late. The constant search for approval is a cage. And freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you stop needing to be understood, accepted, or admired by anyone. Because approval is an illusion. It's like smoke. The more you chase it, the faster it disappears. And the world we live in today feeds that illusion. Every like, every view, every comment is designed to make you think your worth depends on someone else's attention. But a man who defines himself through external approval becomes a slave to it. He starts editing himself, softening his edges, filtering his truth, diluting his power just to be liked. He becomes agreeable, predictable, and invisible. That's the modern trap. Men have been told that being good means being compliant, that keeping everyone happy is the mark of a strong man. But in reality, it's the mark of a man who's forgotten who he is. Freedom begins when you realize that validation is optional and self-respect is not. When you stop performing for others, you start living for yourself. You no longer ask, will they like me? You start asking, do I respect myself after this? That one shift changes everything, because the man who doesn't chase approval starts commanding it naturally. He speaks less, but his words carry more weight. He gives less attention, but it means more when he does. He doesn't need to be seen. People notice him anyway. Women feel that energy instantly. They can tell when a man's confidence isn't built on their reaction. That kind of presence, calm, centered, detached, is magnetic. It's not arrogance, it's mastery. And here's the paradox. The less you need approval, the more people want to give it to you. Because confidence without desperation is rare. In a world where everyone is begging to be noticed, the man who can walk alone radiates quiet power. Freedom from approval doesn't mean isolation. It means choice. You choose who gets access to your time, your mind, your emotions. You no longer chase validation. You give it only when it's earned. That's the kind of man the world respects but can't control. The kind of man women crave but can't manipulate. Because he's no longer seeking to belong. He's already whole. The illusion of approval dies the moment you realize you were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be respected by the right ones. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes something profound. Pleasure fades, but peace lasts. For years, men are trained to chase stimulation, the thrill of the text, the rush of the match, the high of validation. It feels alive at first, intoxicating, addictive, even powerful. But after a while, the same cycle that once felt exciting starts to feel empty. Because pleasure is temporary. It demands constant feeding, more attention, more approval, more chaos. And no matter how much you get, it's never enough. You're chasing a feeling that always runs one step ahead. That's where peace comes in. Peace is quiet. It doesn't scream for your attention. It doesn't flood your brain with dopamine. It just sits there, waiting for you to stop chasing and finally look inward. When a man begins to choose peace over pleasure, his entire energy changes. He no longer needs to be entertained to feel alive. He no longer needs validation to feel valuable. He stops reacting and starts leading. Because peace isn't passive. It's power under control. It's walking into a room and not needing to prove yourself. It's sitting in silence without reaching for your phone. It's knowing that nothing external can disturb your internal balance. You see, pleasure is what keeps most men distracted. It keeps them scrolling, chasing, lusting, always reaching for something outside of themselves. Peace is what brings those same men home to themselves. And once you've tasted peace, chaos becomes unbearable. You stop tolerating drama. You stop engaging with people who drain you. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. Because real fulfillment doesn't come from excitement. It comes from alignment, from knowing that you're on your path, doing your work, living by your code. That's what makes you sleep at night, with your mind still. And ironically, that peace is what makes you magnetic. Because while everyone else is chasing highs, you're radiating stability. And in a world addicted to noise, calm becomes irresistible. Women feel that difference. They're drawn to the man who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't break under silence, who doesn't need constant stimulation to feel alive. Because that kind of peace feels like power. The men who step away from dating aren't giving up on a connection. They're prioritizing peace over chaos. They're learning that chasing short-term pleasure is easy, but maintaining long-term peace, that's mastery. So the next time you find yourself tempted by distraction, ask yourself, is this feeding my peace or feeding my emptiness? Because every man eventually learns the highs are temporary, the chaos is exhausting, but peace, Peace is freedom. And once you've found that kind of peace, you'll never trade it for pleasure again. There was a time when men gave their attention freely to anyone who smiled, texted, or flirted back. But that era is ending. We're witnessing the rise of a new kind of man. One who understands the value of his focus, his time, and his energy. A man who doesn't chase every opportunity, every woman, or every thrill. A man who chooses carefully and powerfully. This is the return of the selective man. Because after years of emotional chaos, men are realizing that not everyone deserves access to them. Not every woman deserves your energy just because she's attractive. Not every conversation deserves a reply just because it flatters you. A man's attention is currency, and when you give it away carelessly, you go broke. But when you guard it like treasure, the world starts to take notice. You see, women are drawn to what they can't easily have. Not because they're manipulative, but because scarcity creates value. The moment a man becomes selective, his presence starts to command respect. He no longer says yes to everything. He doesn't tolerate disrespect. He doesn't entertain chaos. Because he knows that peace is expensive, and he's not willing to trade it for attention. The selective man has standards. He values character over curves, loyalty over looks, depth over dopamine. He understands that not every beautiful face hides a beautiful mind, and not every good time is worth the aftermath. When men become selective, they flip the power dynamic. They stop competing for women, and women start competing for them. Not because they play games, but because they radiate self-respect. And self-respect is magnetic. You can't fake it. You can't replicate it. You can only earn it by mastering yourself. That's what the selective man represents. Discipline, clarity, and control. He doesn't operate from scarcity. He operates from abundance. He doesn't need attention because he already validates himself. And here's the irony. The more selective a man becomes, the higher quality of women he attracts. Not the ones looking for entertainment, but the ones looking for alignment. Not the ones playing games, but the ones who bring peace. Because when a man respects his boundaries, he filters out the noise. He sees clearly who's meant to walk beside him and who's meant to stay behind. This is the quiet revolution of modern masculinity. Men aren't walking away from women. They're walking away from chaos. They're not rejecting connection. They're rejecting distraction. And in that silence, they find something more powerful than romance. They find respect. The selective man isn't cold. He's calculated. He's not heartless. He's healed. And the moment a man learns to value himself above external approval, the world and the women in it start valuing him too.